Welcome to today's video. I'm Richard Chapo. I am a internet attorney in San Diego, California. Been representing online businesses. Wow, say that 10 times fast. For the past 20 years or so. So today we are talking about the strange origins of the California Consumer Privacy Act. Basically, how it went from an idea to suddenly being a law. Before we get started, let me just mention we're actually doing quite a few different videos on the law, since it's going to be front and center here for 2019 before it goes into effect in January of 2020. So if you are selling or gathering information or interacting with Californians online, you need to be paying attention. Because this law, unlike the GDPR, is not in some foreign country. It's here in the States. And so enforcement actions are going to be aggressive and they're going to be painful. But let's get to the origins. So the California Consumer Privacy Act was originally the California Consumer Privacy Act, the initiative. In California, we have a bit of a different system than many states. You can avoid the government when you want to enact on a law. Sometimes you can bypass the legislature and the governor, and you do this through the initiative process. So essentially, you draft a bill that you want to be a law, you register it with the state, you publicize it, and then you go out and you annoy local Californians at places like grocery stores and malls in an effort to get them to sign a petition that says, put this initiative on the ballot for the next election. And if you get enough petition signatures and they're verified by the state, then congratulations, your initiative goes on the ballot. Now, as you can imagine, some of the initiatives are well thought out and make great laws. Some do not. But the basic idea behind the initiative process is that you can have grassroots efforts to pass and enact laws. The California Consumer Privacy Act probably isn't so much of a grassroots effort. It's actually really something brought by some people with some rather large resources, specifically San Francisco developer Alistair McTaggart, veteran of the finance industry Rick Arney, and then interestingly enough, a former CIA analyst named Mary Ross. So I always like to think that there's going to be some spy element to the Privacy Act, but so far, nothing. I'm hoping somebody gets kidnapped or shot or, I don't know, explosions, damn it, something. But again, so far, nothing. Now, California being home to a rather large tech industry, you might imagine that there would be some opponents to this law. And there were. Now, not just because they hate the idea of consumer privacy. The initial initiative is quite a bit different than the law that we have today. And one of the key aspects of it was it contained quite a bit of language that effectively made it very difficult for businesses to sell personal data. So if you collected personal data from people who are natural persons and residents of California, it would be very hard to sell their data to another company for moolah. And now, you may well know this monetization business model is rather key to Google and Facebook. This is pretty much what they do to make money. And you're also seeing it with a lot of other tech-related companies, Verizon and AT&T. So it was no real surprise to learn that these groups were ponying up to fight the initiative. And each were known to have kicked in at least $200,000 to that effort. I'm sure many, many hundreds of millions of dollars would have been spent if the act had gotten anywhere near an actual election. It did not. And the reason for that was scandal, baby, scandal. Unfortunately, this one didn't involve any, illicit affairs or anything of that sort. Instead, we had a group called Cambridge Analytica, who is alleged to have run amok. And so Cambridge was, in this case at least, collecting data off of Facebook. And it's alleged that it did it legitimately and also maybe not so legitimately, excuse me. But the purpose of that collection was to create voter profiles, and those were supposedly used in the last election. And people were unhappy about this. There was much gnashing of teeth, and Mark Zuckerberg was dragged before Congress to give some sort of strange digital apology / testimony / figure out if he wants to run for president. It was all kind of a bit of a circus show, as you would kind of expect. But the upshot of it was that in polling in California, we noticed that the expected result for the initiative was going in one direction, and that was towards passage. And so roughly maybe 6 months before the election, it became apparent that, hey, this initiative is going to pass. What is that going to actually mean? And when the initiative was looked at a little closer, a lot of people realized, hey, there are a lot of problems with this. Some of the problems were that the initiative violated federal law. And a state law cannot violate a federal law because the feds trump state law. And so good bits of the act would be dubious as to whether they would stand. And that made it difficult for businesses and consumers alike to try to figure out, if this was going to be a valid law or not. There were other more practical issues. There wasn't a period for businesses to adjust to the new law. With the GDPR, for instance, the privacy regulation we see in Europe, there was a 2-year period between when it was actually enacted, if you will, and then actually going to be enforced. The original initiative in California did not have that, and it was going to cause chaos. In California, we usually see a year or longer, depending on how complex the law is, for businesses to get ready for it. And so what happened at that point was we had the California government and the political powers there sat down with the people backing the initiative and came to a solution. Now, the California government at that time, this was not a conservative versus liberal negotiation. The California government is very liberal. Governor Brown, who was a Democrat, considered very liberal, was obviously in power then, and the legislature was Democrat as well. And so the end result was that they came up with something called the California Consumer Privacy Act of 2018 that was drafted, quote unquote, negotiated and signed into law all in 7 days in the summer of 2018. To give you an idea of how short a period that is, the GDPR in Europe, it took them 4 years. And so we're talking about something that was rushed through, and some of the key provisions were changed. So, for instance, businesses are no longer banned from selling personal data. However, they have to disclose quite a bit of information to consumers, and California residents have the right to opt out of having their information sold. So that's a key change. So it's certainly a step in the right direction if you believe consumers should have better control of their data. If you don't believe that, then it's not. We also have a longer period to get businesses into compliance, so it's not going into effect until January 1st, 2020. And there are other parts of it that are a little more friendly and a little more realistic. Now, because it was drafted and signed into law in 7 days, there are a lot of technical issues with the law, and so we're seeing amendments. We've already seen one big one. We're expecting more to come down the road. So it's important to understand that things may change. Not hugely, I would think, from a substantive perspective, but we can expect that there are definitely going to be some tweaks. And then we are also going to have the California Attorney General issue regulations at some point here, probably in 2020. And that will also go a long way to explaining how the act is supposed to be followed on a day-to-day basis. But nonetheless, that's how the act went from kind of an idea to a interesting political handshake, where it was actually signed into law with very little of the actual typical democratic process that you would expect to see when a bill makes it through and becomes the law. It just was very strange. But here we are, and it's in place, and so we have to deal with it. So again, we'll be creating other videos on the act, and you should go to our homepage and look in the playlist. You'll see a playlist that covers the topic, and hopefully we'll have the information there that you need to get a better idea of what's going on with this act. Again, you need to be preparing for it ahead of time, because when January 1st, 2020 hits, it's going to be in force. And so you want to make sure you have your act together before then. So check out the videos. Thanks for watching this one, and have yourself a good one. Bye.